Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Quackcast. This is the Drunkduck Quackcast. I'm Ocean with me, Tance and Baines. Hello, Tance and Baines.
Hello. I have returned. I have been appeased.
Not mad anymore. All right, theme song. And now we're back. So, the topic of this Quackcast is fight choreography. But before we get into that, we're going to bring up the featured comic. And the featured comic this week was Short-Sighted. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Short-Sighted. Shiori is almost mechanically shy. She just doesn't know how to communicate with other people. Not because she's scared, but because she doesn't understand the process. However, the charming Toshiaki has taken her under his wing, and he's working at smoothing out the process for her. Starting with the pretty Keiko, poor Shiori is trapped in a prison of her own reluctance to communicate. But Toshiaki is chipping away at the blocks slowly. The story is a slice-of-life drama with a school setting. It's quite uncompressed and communicates a lot without words, just using looks, expressions, and clever panel layouts and design. The art is all black and white, heavily gestural line work, with drawing in a manga-influenced style. There's some really cool angles, perspectives, layouts, and design work in later pages. The art just gets better and better. So this is a comic by Tomo Terry. It's rated E for everyone, so everyone can enjoy it. I loved it. I hope you will too. There's more to it. The characters kind of are developing more and more as you read it, especially Shiori, the main character. She's growing. She's wanting to expand outside of herself and become more social in it. It's a good process to follow. So I hope you enjoy it. Maybe learn from it yourself and read it. Tomo Terry is the creator, and this is Short-Sighted. That was the feature, the Short-Sighted feature. Okay, so next up we have the music. Gamolis has given us a theme to a comic called Cork and Blotto, which was featured, I believe it was featured quite a while ago, but who knows? I'll have to double check that. So this music, it's Hill Street bluesish 80s sounding TV drama action theme mixed with holy reverential choir. It's tasty, spiky, red-hot lashings of electric guitar splashed thoroughly through it, counterbalancing the more thoughtful and staid piano. So take it away, Gumwallace, with your theme to Cork and Blotto. And that was the theme to Cork and Blotto, which is a comic by Steva Blotto, and it's rated M for mature. Okay, so fight choreography. Fight. Finish him.
Fatality.
Fatality. Babality. Can't remember all the rest.
So, shall we be a bit more structured than we were in the videocast, where we said about stuff we love and stuff we don't love as much?
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
And what kind of structure?
Well, let's say what constitutes a fight, first of all, and what should be the main things that a good choreography gets across.
Okay, so what constitutes a fight? Some sort of energetic, physical interaction between two or more characters towards. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be, but generally it should be towards some objective.
Yeah.
Sounds like my honeymoon. Ho!
Oh God, mate.
The classic stand-up joke. So.
But on Tish.
At least it has to be like one of the parties wants to overpower the other one in some way.
Sounds like my honeymoon.
But on Tish. I don't know. I think it's one character wants to achieve something and the other character wants to prevent them from achieving that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not always. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, and it has to be, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it has to be physical in some way.
Yeah, I was going to say it was like a conflict, but there's a physicality to it. There's a movement.
Like your honeymoon.
Exactly, yeah. Or the illusion of movement, like in a comic.
Yeah,
there's some like physical movement or physical action going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you have fights, you have brawls, and you have battles and duels and what have you.
Duels. So duels is an interesting one. So that one has to be limited to two characters. Whereas, fights can be more chaotic. You can have one against many, which is quite typical. And then, brawls are many against many. Usually battles are many against many, but not
organized.
Yeah, they're like one group against another group, whereas a brawl isn't. A brawl is everybody against everybody. Yeah. So that's the difference between a battle and a brawl. But that's quite interesting.
Yeah, there's a battle. I mean, parts of a battle can fit in, right? Like a battle is, in a way, a different animal. But I mean, I guess you can focus in on.
Yeah, battles definitely fit in. They're just a larger version of a fight choreography.
Yeah. And more official in a sense. Everyone shows up dressed up for it.
Right, yeah.
More formal.
Yeah.
But very, very true. Yeah, so we've got duels, brawls, and battles. That's a good separation. I think there's probably there are probably multiple kind of variations between all these things, but using those as three main ones is a good way of separating them. So people, having an altercation in order to achieve, like one party wants to achieve a goal, one party wants to prevent them. Generally, but that's not always. That's just one particular popular kind of a fight choreography. There are others.
Yeah, it could be just even something like I don't like your face, so I'm going to cave it in, sort of thing.
Say in a brawl, that's what exactly you've got. You've got a chaotic thing, like a bar fight in movies. Or comics or wherever. Bar fights are chaotic. Everyone's fighting everyone, and there's no particular purpose. It's just the joy of fighting, generally. Or someone
like in Asterix's village, where everyone, a dog pile, or everyone against everyone and everybody else. So.
Often the goal of those, though, is like there's chaotic stuff, and it's entertainment. So the goal of that is just entertaining the audience with the fight. But if there is a main character in that, usually their goal is survival. So they are participating in that, but they just want to survive somehow. So that's their goal. So they will fight when they need to, or duck and hide and stuff like that often.
Yeah.
Because that's their primary goal. Generally in
Uh,
those kind of things. Sometimes they're just having fun, but yeah, usually it's shown particularly to show that. Don't you think?
Yeah. And I think especially like in the context of Asterix, it is treated like a running joke, that the village fights and they fight with each other as well. And it is treated more like a social event where everyone goes to vent and then they are just all right afterwards. So it's like, yeah, we fight each other and we break each other's bones, but afterwards it's all good.
Well,
So I think that is a gimmick more than an actual brawl, because even in that comic, in the few instances where the brawl is real, like there is actual enmity, it is treated differently. Uh,
well,
yeah.
the important thing in Asterix as well, very important about those brawls, is that's the only fight between equals. Normally in
Yes.
Asterix, it's always the Gauls beating up everybody, no matter who they are. It's one-sided. But in the brawls, that's when it's not one-sided.
No, everyone has the same amount of brawn and power and strength. But yeah, now that you mentioned it, there was this one book of Asterix. I guess in English it was called the Discord because I had it in Greek. And it was about this one little weaselly Roman guy that manages, after having studied the profile of every Gaul that we know in the village, to play them against each other to actually make them enemies.
I remember
And
that
he
one.
does that. Yeah, it's a masterpiece of a work. It's one of my favorite stories from Asterix. But when they actually fight, while they have this real, genuine, guttural enmity, the brawl is drawn differently. It is still, entertaining, and it has ridiculous, uh, setups, like one is biting someone else's ankle, or they are beating each other with fish, but it is treated as a lot more serious because they don't have. It looks like they hurt each other more. I don't know how to explain it else in this way. Um, but yeah, I think the way they draw a lot fewer people fighting with each other, and the angle is a little different. Like it is more up close and personal, like rather than the big dog pile that we are used to.
So more
Uh,
duels?
Yeah, more like it's not only a duel because people are drawn in as they do in Asterix, but it is fewer people and more invested in fighting. And then when the fight ends, they are still very much mad at each other.
There's a good choreography for it.
Mm, I do think so. It's subtle. I would have to look at it again. It's been years since I last read it. But I do remember like it felt different at least.
Yeah. It's interesting doing fight choreography. I mean, when you're drawing it in a comic opposed to, like, say, if you're doing full action stuff, it's easy to show movement and the direction and, the purpose of different attacks because it's in full motion, even though people aren't actually doing a real fight ever in movies. But in comics, it's a lot more tricky because you've got to hint at that and show that stuff. And I remember when I did my first, real kind of fight choreography all the way back in Pinky TA when I had CC versus the Secretary. It was quite a challenge. I had a big think about, the movements from here to there in different panels and how someone ended up in this way. From this movement and this movement, what she must have done and how they must have moved. But all through that, my main focus was, like showing sexy thighs and bums and poops and all this kind of stuff. So I had these two or three different kind of things. I wanted to show the fight. I wanted to show the movement. I wanted to show that they had, moves that would work, and it was believable, but as well as showing off, sexy parts. So it was a really interesting, very hard thing to do, and I didn't really nail the perspectives and the drawing styles of the figures that well, but I think I nailed the other kind of things that I wanted to get across well, the movement and the fight and sexiness. So but it's tricky.
Right.
What I've found to work for me when I draw fights of any kind is that I have to draw them in motion, like I took a still from the movie, so to speak, to indicate movement. Never draw them completely immobile in any situation. Like if someone is on the ground, they must have just landed, or if someone is launching an attack, they have to be mid-attack, or crouching and getting ready to do it. That sort of thing. The movement has to not have completed, in a sense.
Okay, mid movement.
Yeah. At least for me, that's what works. Unless you are drawing gunfights, then no.
Right, yeah.
Gunfights. I wonder if I've done that. I probably have.
You must have.
I don't know. Fains, what about you? What's your fight choreography like?
I don't do a whole lot in my comics. I remember reading something or hearing something about the moment of full, like, say a punch or a kick or whatever. It's like you don't show that moment of impact as a general rule. You show the maximum extension. You would show just after a punch, for example.
Yeah.
And you see that, constantly in comics where it's like a full, just after the punch, you see the fist past the person's already
bouncing
turning or falling back or whatever. The maximum moment of mid jump, if you're jumping off jumping off something, jumping into an opponent, or jumping to get away or whatever. It's like that, those extreme moments. That's not always the way to do it, of course, but
but it does work a lot. I mean, now that you mentioned it, that creates the biggest drama.
Right.
Because by having the impact on paper, like the impact has already taken place, the eye of the reader can assess how much force was put behind the punch, for example. Whereas if it is just touching, you cannot really tell because it is still image.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Maybe that ties into what you were saying about like having it motion, like capturing the idea of motion. Even though, like, if someone's punching someone, if there is any pause, it would just be for a split second, probably. But
if you ever do them posed in a punch movement, it looks very unrealistic. Like there's this famous photos of Muhammad Ali posed in punch movements, and even though it was real, it looks fake.
Yeah,
because it's just taken at the wrong moment. It looks very heroic and awesome, but it doesn't look like he's actually fighting. It looks like he's posing. So
yeah, and you see some old comics that are maybe based on similar fights that kind of look like that. They look kind of static.
Yeah. So that's one thing I think that is important in fights, and the other one is to have a good sense of space of the area where the fight is taking place. Like where is everybody, where is everything, and give a sense of the geography of the place, in a sense. Not completely, but just give an idea, so that the mind can fill in the rest as they are reading.
Yeah, to be able to understand what's going on keeps
Mhm.
keeps you interested in what you're watching, what you're reading.
Yeah, you don't have to put every
Yeah.
single freaking detail in.
Yeah, you can't, and you shouldn't. uh, like now that I'm doing this incredibly complex fight that I shouldn't have done. But okay, in Verdant, the idea is that the despotate is attacking into the swamp forest, and then the huge war mounts are tearing down some of the trees to make way for the army and all of that. Yeah, if I were to draw that normally, like how it would look in the movie, I would die. There is no way for me to be able to do that. So what I have done is that I have chosen certain angles that set the place so that you can tell that they are coming from the castle to the forest, that the war beasts are tearing down trees. And it's just one in a close-up, but not so much of a close-up that I cannot show that it is the rest of the forest. So I can draw something that still takes way too much time, but enough that I can justify drawing it, if that makes sense. So yeah.
So that's to know. Well, you mentioned the forest. Is that so we know that we're near a forest, we're in a forest, and like all that kind of stuff? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's so challenging. Yeah, to do battle stuff is something you have to think about. I don't know. You have to think about all aspects just as much.
Yeah.
Even if if it's one-on-one or one-on-many, you still probably the same level, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. That was the problem in the last battle in Without Moonlight, which is where it's not a spoiler, where they bring down the bridge. And before that, there is this fight because they have to overpower the garrisons that are there. And it's basically a huge gunfight, in a sense. And then it devolves into some close combat, according to the accounts. But the biggest problem of this is that it was so dark historically that nobody could tell what anyone else was doing. And it's approximations. And I have to, first of all, guess what everyone was doing. Second of all, I have to show that it was very dark. And then I have to help orient the reader in a place that is already unfamiliar. So that was hard, and I had to whittle down the battle a lot to be able to actually handle it. I wanted to do a lot more things, show a lot more like little instances of small fights that had broken out between Greeks and Italians mostly, here and there in pockets. But it would be like nobody would know where anyone else is. So I said, okay, no, do just the two, and then go ahead and show the sabotaging. And that's it.
Yeah, it's very important to narrow your scope down.
Mm.
And even if you were doing a movie, it would be exactly the same thing. You'd have to narrow your scope because of budget constraints and time and things like that.
Yeah, totally.
Because you don't want to overwhelm people, but you also don't want to waste your budget on stuff that is, outside of the remit that you don't have to show.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you get to save on all sorts of things. But like if you were doing like a live action thing, you'd have to save on like the amount of time that you show the battle, but also the amount of like effects to use to show these guns are firing, and yeah,
And how
safety
many extras?
concerns and extras and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, both in drawing and reality, it makes sense to narrow your scope.
Yeah. But in order to do that, you first have to know exactly what is happening, and then you can make decisions on what to narrow down, where to narrow down, and you always have to have in mind what is happening outside the frame. Uh, you always have to know what is off camera in a
Yes, there's a
battle.
logic to how things progress. Well, as a comic artist, we have a much easier time of that, I would say, because we are, usually a one-man band. But even if you're a team, you've got one person who's in control normally. So you've got your objective in mind, and you can sort of tailor everything. In movies, they have the disadvantage of having, directors and like editors and all, like people with oversight, producers and things like that, and direct studio people saying, you can do this, you can do that. And often you look at the fight scenes in movies and TV shows, and they don't know what they're doing because someone's, had some idea when they were directing it, but that's just gone through so many hands that the end result is very confusing, and there's no clear objective to any of it. And you as a viewer have to work out what happened, and you go, oh, I think this is what was happening. Oh, you end up looking at it and go, that's incredibly unrealistic, and I'm very unconvinced, and my suspension of disbelief is broken because that's what happens.
Right.
Yeah. I would also say that something that you have to consider is, okay, you are showing a fight scene. What do you want the reader to take away from that fight scene? Besides that, oh, wow, great fight scene. Okay. But beyond that, what else should the reader leave the scene with as an experience?
And a comic, that's quite easy, I would say, because like I said, you're a one-man band, so you have, you're in control, so you can very easily think, I want to show this character being a badass, or I want to show this character suffering trauma, or learning new skills, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I want to traumatize the reader by showing horrible things.
Right.
Yeah,
Shows that the character is overwhelmed, or they're the underdog, or their opponent is super strong, or something. Depending on what's going on in the story, what's going on with the characters.
Yeah, I remember in one of like my, let's say, novellas, not a big novel, but I had this fight between witches because originally I have always been a fantasy author besides the history. So there was this fight, and supposedly the evil set of witches were primordial, let's say, witches. And they had like this more visceral, more powerful magic that they were wielding compared to the more modern witches that had, practiced magic between sipping lattes. I don't know, something like that. It wasn't a current story, but I mean that it was such a big removal between logic and approach. Like these guys were ancient, and these guys were more modern. And the modern guys were supposedly very powerful witches, but when going up against these ancient ones, they suddenly looked like ants trying to take up a bear, and nothing they did could work. And that was their terrifying moment of realization that I am going to lose where I'm, usually used to winning. So I'm going to lose this and possibly my life. And this is how the story basically begins with this epic loss.
Right.
And
okay, so that's your objective. That's what you want to show.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Through a fight, I showed, or at least I hope I did, I showed the stakes, who the bad guys were, what the problem is going to be to resolve this story, and I gave the main character some motive.
That's interesting. I was looking at some of my old Pinky TA stuff where I've got fight scenes often. And yeah, I've got that one that I mentioned earlier, the sexy fight scene, showing. So the main purpose there is just to show that Cece is really skilled, vicious, but also lots of sexiness. But later on, the fight scenes are very deliberately meant to. There's two things. So they're meant to show that the coolness of a fight. So you can show, like this fight looks incredibly cool, but also how horrific and horrible the result of it is. So like Pinky might be, people will be shooting people with machine guns. And, in films, when people shoot with machine guns, the bullets just fly everywhere. And maybe sometimes someone get hit behind a bush or something like that or whatever. But in this, they get torn to pieces. And blood flies everywhere. So it's to show that, this can look cool, but actually it's really horrible. So I'm showing those two things happening at the same time. So, that's because the purpose of Pinky TA, at least in that early stage, was to show that even though war is seductive and war imagery and comics about war are seductive, war is actually a really horrible thing.
Yeah.
So we're always trying to get that in there. And that was the purpose of all the gunfight scenes, at least.
That's something I did notice in your work, like really early, and I really liked it. Because I really like the quote unquote trope. It's not a trope, it's also a reality that war is hell. And even when it is cool, it is still hell. So.
Yeah, because too often people show, like Saving Private Ryan, where war is just hell, and it doesn't even look good. It just looks horrible and gritty and awful. But it just hammers that thing home too much, and you kind of just get desensitized to it, I think. You just sort of turn off and don't really... Because it's just too awful. So you think, I get the message, whatever, dude. I hope you save Private Ryan. So it doesn't... Whereas a film like Commando, that's Sylvester Stallone being not Sylvester Stallone, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger being extra tough, just firing unlimited ammunition. So that goes too far in the other way. It's like super cool. It doesn't matter if you die. It's an honor to be killed by this amazing Superman. So I thought like a middle ground, so to show the coolness, but show how actually uncool that is, That's a better way to do it. Because like war imagery of like traditional war imagery was always, glory. So, and Saving Private Ryan to me was just too much of like cutting out all that glory stuff. But then you think, wow, why do war movies exist anyway? So this sort of doesn't understand the idea of a war movie, I thought. It's just too gritty and too nasty without the reason why people actually, why the genre exists. So that's my opinion on that.
I think that it depends on who is watching. I remember when I went to see Saving Private Ryan, I was shocked with the original opening scene. I think I was, how old was I? When did it come out? I don't even remember.
2000, maybe?
You must have been about 50 back then, I think.
Yeah, because around 2000, I must have been around like my early 20s or thereabouts.
5 years old.
19, 20, 21, somewhere around there. I refuse to do math at this point. So, and I remember crying. and I don't usually cry in movies. It's not that I don't cry. It's hard to make me cry. And this type of crying that I did for Saving Private Ryan in the beginning, uh, I haven't done again. Because it was gut punch under the belt. I had no idea it was going to be like this. I thought it was going to be more like, I don't know, Guns of the Navarone or something like that. That's like larger than life war movie. Let's go, Save Private Ryan. But it drove home to me this idea of the gore, the sheer gore that goes into war. And I hadn't had that up to then. I was sheltered, I don't know. But I didn't have this concept. And I remember that throughout the rest of the movie, I was numbed, like you say, Oz. But I kept thinking that that's how these soldiers were as well. And it was an experience for me. I think that movie pivoted me differently in how I handled the war in my stories. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So served the purpose. I was just thinking that often a certain sort of anime does what I do. Like they show that excitingness, but also, contrasted with gore and gruesomeness, although they take it too far the other way and they glorify the gore too much, which is not good.
Yeah.
Especially like if you ever watch like mid-90s anime, oh my god, so that was freaking gory, like cyberpunk stuff. Angel Cop. horrible animes. That's brutal. Never watch Angel Cop.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, there's different ways of tackling. Okay, so like sword fights. There's another kind of fight choreography. So that goes in a lot of different directions. People go too far in the Bushido kind of way. Very, very stylized, simplistic fighting, like in the Japanese style. And it's often quite simplistic. Like there's only a few kind of moves they do in choreographed Bushido. It's not really that complicated. But and then there's like fencing, when people are sort of fighting with like little tiny thin blades, like rapiers or foils or something like that, small swords, ching 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 ching, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of exciting, but it's usually like people directly opposing each other, so going backwards and forwards. But you get the more exciting versions when it's something like what is it? Princess Bride, when they sort of carry it all around in a circle, and that's sort of echoed in some earlier pirate films, like with what's his name, Errol Flynn and people like that, who are sort of climbing and rigging and having fights and all that. Exactly. So those are kind of that's another kind of fighting. Then there's more kind of the chop and thrust kind of fights, like with sabers or with long swords or something like that. And that's little bit more often battle scenes. So yeah, there's a few different ways of doing sword. Oh, Conan the Destroyer, Conan the Barbarian. Yeah, some excellent sword fighting scenes in that film. One of my favorite films. Oh, go on.
Oh, no, you go on.
One of my favorite films for sword fighting is The Duelists, which is the first Ridley Scott film, I think. Yeah, the very first Ridley Scott film. So these are two hussars, and they're having a series of duels over the course of the film. So this is over the course of their lives during the French, after the French Revolution. This is during the French kind of war against everybody all over Europe. But meanwhile, these two hussars of different units are having duels with each other, trying to trying to kill each other whenever they get a chance, and it's pretty awesome. I have a lot of different fights with all different weapons and stuff like that. Well, not different weapons, but different kinds of swords, basically. And that's pretty cool to watch. So the Duelists, I would highly recommend that for sword fighting. So what about you, Bainesy? Any like sword fighting films?
Oh, it's The Princess Bride for me is always the first one that comes to mind, and so I'm glad you mentioned it. And that one's interesting. Like all the before the fight starts, all the setup they do for. I assume everyone's seen this movie, but the setup they do for Inigo Montoya, who's kind of like one of the villains, I guess, in the beginning of the movie. But before they start fighting, this heroic man in black, I think probably a lot of people know that or they figure out that he's the same character from the beginning. Spoiler alert. But
what?
So Inigo Montoya, they give him all this character development when he tells this story, and you kind of learn who he is and what he's all about. That he's this great swordsman, but also that he has this emotional thing, is trying to find his father's killer. And he's very honorable. Like there's sort of an honor between these two guys. They bond at the beginning. They don't hate each other at all. They're kind of doing what they have to do.
Yeah.
I love that because I like both of them. I'm kind of rooting for both of them. And, the way it plays out, it's very exciting. It's also funny. Got these.
I know something you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I am not left-handed. It's great.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, it's weird, and they actually use real, like sword fighting techniques inspired by actual manuals, and they mention it.
Right, and I believe I heard that in the script, that part of the script, it says the greatest sword fight in history ensues. What the director was tasked with shooting.
Oh, jeez. So that must have all come down to the fight choreographer.
Right.
Because they were probably the one who knew about all the different manuals of sword fighting.
True.
To bring those up, yeah. So that was genius. Like they were mentioning different counters and different approaches to the fights in
that's
like
right. They talk
chess
about
moves.
Yeah.
Which is like no one, not no one, but most people who watched that, especially back when that was done in the 80s, would have no idea what any of that meant or even existed, because there was this idea for many years that European sword fighting was just bashing at each other with swords randomly. People didn't know that there was incredible amount of like scholarly study put into sword fighting for European sword fighting. Like they had like legitimate schools and like volumes and volumes of books written about sword fighting.
Right.
Like yeah, it was intense study for all different kinds of sword fighting. Yeah, so like yeah, no one would have known what these people were referring to.
That's right.
So that was an incredible revelation, not just a fight.
Oh, very interesting. And they make that an important part of the characters and the story too, because it's like I've studied for 20 years, and so like obviously Inigo is going to be the greatest swordsman ever, and the Dread Pirate Roberts beats him.
Of course.
But then also in the next scene, not to go on and on about this movie, but he goes to talk to the super intelligent, the Wallace Shawn character, and he says, "Well, you've beaten my giant, so you must be very strong." And then he's like, "But you've also beaten the swordsman, so you must have studied." All of that exact mentality you're talking about goes into the movie, so that's neat.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I liked in that is that you have no trouble following exactly what they are doing, like how they are fighting, who is attacking, how they jump from rock to rock and they move away from the cliff, like gradually, and also that it is like a good sportsmanship fight, although they are enemies at this point, but they have respect for each other. And I really like that, because then later on there is a contrast between how the fight between Inigo Montoya and Humperdinck is taking place, which has not Humperdinck, his henchman,
Six-fingered man.
the six-fingered man. Yeah, that's the one. That has no honor in it whatsoever, and no sportsmanship.
Right.
So I really like that. I like that contrast.
Love it. Yeah, for sure.
It's certainly genius, that film, in so many different ways.
Mm.
I mean, there's the other fight choreography, and that is between Dread Pirate Roberts and the giant that you mentioned, Babes. Physic. Yeah. So that his approach is to use a rock to try and crush the Dread Pirate Roberts, and the Dread Pirate Roberts has his, you think, how is this tiny, minuscule mouse of a man? I mean, he's not that small, but compared to Andre the Giant, he was. How is he going to beat? How is he going to combat this huge creature? How? And humanely as well, because he doesn't set out to kill Fezzik.
No.
So he has a way of fighting him and beating him that doesn't kill him, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And another note is that in the fight scene you mentioned, Tance, how you can follow it. None of it's shown in quick cuts or close-ups of the moves or anything like that.
That's right. Yeah.
You can actually see them moving, and it's very challenging in a sword fight because people can't be close enough to actually hit each other. So, because a hit with a sword, even a blunt one, when you're not armored and protected in any way, can severely injure you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is incredibly well done.
Absolutely.
People don't realize how dangerous that is. So yeah, it's 100 points out of 100.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the movie I rip off. I'm just sitting here thinking and realizing it once again that I rip off that movie for almost every fight scene I do that matters. It's taken from The Princess Bride.
We could do worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Bad fight scenes are in, I would say, the original Star Wars film with the lightsaber duels between I don't know, like
Obi-Wan
Kenobi.
Yeah.
But it's not bad because, I mean, it's exciting and it serves the point, and it's actually pretty good. And the lightsabers, the glowing swords, look fantastic. But the actual fighting itself is pretty dumb. So as long as you don't notice that, then it's fantastic. But if
it's just like purely the physical fighting. I could see where like people criticize it, but yeah, it's like it's got emotional resonance. It's got Alec Guinness's face, who, even though there wasn't even a backstory yet, but like so much just plays out across his face. Like these two were former friends and student and master, and now they're enemies, and like all this sort of imagined backstory at the time.
Yeah.
It's all there. It's like very powerful, but yeah, just as a physical thing, choreography.
If you see just the fight without anything out of context, it's just two old guys beating two clubs together, like the broomsticks from their, from their backyard, and then it's over. It doesn't show any skill or anything like that.
Whack, and it's based on like kendo kind of bushido kind of stuff too.
I don't think it was
imaginative
at the time.
No, like say Conan the Barbarian, one of my favorite films. The fighting there is based on bushido again, kendo stuff. Even though they're not using katanas, but they had a Japanese sword master who was taught them all how to fight. So it has a specific look to it, but it works regardless. It's not that imaginative, but then again, these are primitive people fighting, and it in the context of that world, that works well. So it always depends.
One fight that I really appreciate is in Karate Kid, the original, where Mr. Miyagi beats up the Cobra Kai kids. So they have ganged up on Daniel and they are beating him up. They are wearing these very iconic skeleton Halloween suits. They are dressed as skeletons. And Mr. Miyagi comes like in between Daniel on the ground and the guys, and he completely floors them. And what I appreciated with this was that, first of all, we see it without any real cuts or anything. We see the entire full body frame. And Mr. Miyagi does not turn into this superhero gymnastics wonder beast.
He's still an old guy.
Yeah, he's an old guy, but with a lot of skill, with very economical moves, and he is just interested in putting them out of commission, and that's that. He's not interested in aesthetics. He's not interested in being, all fancy. And that, for me, makes a gorgeous scene because it feels real, even though, it is what it is. But still, it feels really real.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to remember that one, but yeah, that was a very fun 80s fight movie.
Yeah,
Taking a different take on the whole fight movie thing.
Yeah.
Rather than showing someone who's already an expert being the fight. Oh my god. Now I'm thinking of something that's obviously inspired by that. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, no.
Now, that is a silly fight film, but still believable. Not because the fighting is great, which is not. It's because the suits are so funky and the characters are so larger than life, that it makes up for the fact that the fighting's not so great in of itself. So that's an important lesson for us to learn as comic artists. You don't have to have like really well choreographed fighting, as long as there are other aspects that can take up the slack, like sexiness of the characters or badassness, the way how good they look or whatever, and the importance of the thing they're trying to achieve, all that kind of stuff can all take up the slack. So you don't have to be the world's best fight choreographer in order to produce a good fight.
You just need to hit the crucial narrative points, and everyone.
Now, did we mention how much I hate John Wick? I don't think we did.
I like John Wick, so there you go.
I think the first time I really noticed that stuff was in I think it's the second James Bond film with what's his name? The latest James Bonds.
Well, yeah.
So not Casino Royale, maybe I don't know. Who knows what the crappy names of these films are? But in the second one that he did,
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, Daniel Craig. Yeah.
Okay.
Quantum of Solace.
Probably that one. So it was just like incredibly balletic fight moves where there's like counter perfectly matches a strike that both characters do, and they just go on with this, amazing choreography and all this kind of stuff. And you think, spies don't have to do that, don't have to be that expert. But it takes away the reality of James Bond. I mean, not that James Bond was ever realistic, but the Daniel Craig version was more realistic than the previous versions. And now he's a super expert at all this. He can run 1,000,000 miles and still be able to fight and do
he's basically, in my opinion, he's a bit of a Mary Sue at this point, because I like
100%.
I don't like James Bond generally. I think he's an obnoxious ass. Sorry. But at least the earlier versions had this, at least gave me the idea that his power, his strength lay in being very suave and very good
Clever.
and clever and stuff, and not really an action guy. Like, you could take him in a fight, but he could probably one up you because he has like a dagger up his sleeve.
Yeah.
Not that he's this like a space soldier that does everything.
Well said, Tans. Yeah, the Daniel Craig version does. Whereas, previously, he'd win a fight because he'd cheat, as a spy should. That's what a spy should do. He should cheat. He should have his little gadget, his little watch, or a pen or something that does the trick.
Yeah, exactly. Or he should just absolutely avoid the fight. Like, that's the point. The point is to avoid the fight.
I used to love everyone hates Roger Moore. Not everyone. Clever people like
him.
I
like him.
But yeah, there you go. Clever people, like I said. But, I used to love him because he was very suave and very supercilious, and would, if he had other options, he would pick them. He wouldn't be a brute and just go directly for the attack.
He generally wasn't a brute. And I also, my favorite James Bond, if there is a favorite, assuming, is the one. What's the actor named? Dalton. Dalton is the last name.
Timothy Dalton.
Timothy Dalton. That's the one I really liked as a James Bond, because he managed what Daniel Craig doesn't, being more like grittier, more realistic, but still a freaking spy, not a super soldier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he in his older years even became so cool, Timothy Dalton. It would have been nice to see them bring him back as an older Bond. It would have been great.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I would love to see an older James Bond, supposedly being like even more clever, even more like suave and able to weasel his way out of situations or into situations and stuff. And his main struggle being that he may not have as much sexiness anymore. So he has to find some other way to charm people and ladies.
Right.
So, yeah, I would watch that. I would
Exactly.
still find him. I would find him obnoxious still, but I would watch that. Yeah.
There is a role for it. Although I will say, with Roger Moore's fights were often very silly. When he did fight, he was sort of doing the old fake karate stuff, which is no good. All right, well, the Quackcast is about to end.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for listening to Quackcast number 707.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Baines. Bye, Tance.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Da-da-da.
Hasta la vista.
Oh, damn, so much action we could have thought. All right.